Alrighty, so now we're ready to take a look at what we made in the Photoshop here in Substance. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new substance. We'll call this tiled stone, and we'll just make a regular PBR. And let's set this up before we forget. So I'm going to go into my materials, default, edit, and then come down into my height and get my scale up to 1 so that we'll be able to see our height maps. Now, might as well see what our tiling's looking like too. So I'm going to set the tiling on the cube to 2. Right, so let's get into our Explorer, and we might as well save this now. So we'll call it tiled stone. And I'm going to right click, and I'm going to link these bitmaps, because if we change them, we don't have to re-import them, they'll update. And these are the 2 maps that we had made. So I've gone ahead and linked those. Oops, wrong thingy. And they're now in this resources folder. So I can just drag them out here, and we're going to use them as grayscale maps. And we're going to go ahead and just convert them straight away. And even though our parent size is 512, we want all our information here. So we're not actually going to lower down the size of these. So once you start building material with this, these maps or masks, or however you end up using them, you want at the highest resolution, because the Substance Designer system is going to take care of the moving the parenting size up and down. But you absolutely want to have things that you import in at the highest possible resolution that you're planning on using this material at. I'm going to just do compute node thumbnails, and that's going to give us both of these things. So this chappy we had designated for the height, and this one we had designated for the normal. And I'll stick that in the normal, and I'm going to go ahead, just to get a good habit, if you're building for game engines, you want to fill that alpha with input. And let's move our height map near our normal map, because that's how I like to roll. And we can move our height map in here. Now we can take a look. Oh, that's very shiny. I'm going to just go ahead and put a color in here so it's not quite so crazy shiny right now. And we're going to, for the moment anyway, put in the base color. So here's our mask as we have it right now in Photoshop. That's not looking too bad. That's a little too much in the height. And if we take out the height, we can see the normals. If you leave the normals alone, they're fine. In other words, I think what I want to do is pretty much flatten out the entirety of that height mask, of the height map rather, because the minute I do any kind of detail with it, we end up with this craziness in here. So we can now go back to Photoshop, and this is why I made a copy. And I can now start fooling around with this. My issue right now is with these guys here. So I think this is relatively straightforward. Let's go back into the levels and see if we can't just get it just barely there as far as the variation. And then we can take the whole thing and bring down the brightness back to what we had it before. So I think that's going to take care of a lot of it. And then what we're also going to want to do is clean it up a little bit more. So again, I'm going to come, we already have a layer for that, and I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to get, actually I'm just going to use the brush. I'm going to pick a color and I'm just going to start cleaning up. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And just getting, yeah, so essentially what we're ending up doing here is really hand coloring a lot of this. But it's not like difficult coloring. You know, we're not too worried about getting everything. I am worried about the really dark ones, like the black bits. Those are the pieces that concern me the most. Everything else will probably be okay. So I'm really just concentrating on those. You know, and like I said, this is the most labor intensive of all the maps. It usually ends up being, because it's kind of a persnickety thing to make anyway. And the more of them you do, also you get better at it, because it begins to be easier to visualize what it is that you want. So, and I'm just going to go ahead and cover up these white areas too. Ah, that's wrong. Where it's, because those are just going to show up as kind of just like holes. And you know, if you got a couple of them, you can't really notice, but if you got too many of them, it starts looking weird and jagged. So, all right. Now the nice thing about having linked this file instead of, oh, I don't think I showed you me saving them. I saved them to a particular folder. I did that during the break. I don't think I showed you guys, but I'm pretty sure you guys know how to save files. So I'm going to do that again. So here we are. In fact, we didn't even need to make this. I'm just going to get rid of it. I have it in a folder, so I know that this is like my, whatever I have in here is like my latest. And I'm just going to go and save as PNG, and this is my height map. So I saved it as height, and that's the map that we had brought into Substance. And we can now go into our Substance Designer after it's actually finished saving. Yeah, let it finish saving first. And it will update in here. So if we, it already looks better. It's got a lot less of that, these jaggedy bits. And we can tell that by removing, and when we plug it in, I mean, I'm looking at the detail now. I mean, there's some because we left some in, but it's much better. What I'm looking to get rid of are those weird spikes. Actually, is that the same map? Yeah, it's updated. You can see that's where we colored in. We just didn't do enough of it. Let's see if we can't take care of it in here. Because we can also do leveling in here. I don't know, that really depends on what you're doing. So I want to, but I don't think it's going to help. I think it's going to be better. It'll be better doing it in Photoshop, because we've already got the layers set up there. So let's just head back there and do the same thing again. I'm going to just completely wash this one out. So it's almost completely flat at this point. And again, we can go into the brightness. And we can now do the same thing up in these white areas as well. We've already got the layer mask on there, so it's just a question of repeating the process. Image, adjustments, levels. I'm going to flatten that out a little bit more too. So again, all we have to do is save as, and we overwrite the file. I'm doing that off screen and wait for it to save out. And then we can come back into Substance, and if we look at our image, it's updated for us. So I think this is probably a much better height map to use. And now, well, I'm just going to start with a new levels node. And now, since we've got these basic areas worked out, we can use a level nodes in here now to give it that final adjustment, that final boost. Tighten it up a little bit. So I wanted my darks. Yeah, I just want more variation, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in there now. And that's giving us our height map. Yeah, I noticed, you know, this new version of Substance, you can't really pump up that height map the way you used to be able to do. So if you're looking at this in Unity, you could probably go a bunch crazier with your heights. But I'm starting to see here, you know, let's take a look at it without the normals. Oh, we can't do that. It's gotten rid of most of that stuff, so I'm going to consider this done as far as the height maps, etc. And let's go back now to our Photoshop, and we can now come back and get our original color image. Oh my goodness, is that? Nope, that's black and white. We put the color one in here. And this is why I keep everything. I'll turn these off. And this is our color one here. I'm seeing a... I just noticed something. I'm going to fix this. I don't think it's going to really affect our heights, but I'm noticing this little part right here. I'm going to get my clone tool. I'm going to make a smaller brush. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to quickly fix this up. This is a relatively easy fix. And it's, I think, small enough that it's not going to bother our masks. It's just going to follow this line down, make sure, yeah, there's another spot that we missed. This is what happens when you come up on those edges. So it pays to take a really close look. It's only going to happen along this line, so you know where to look for it. You can come in real close and give it a final once-over to make sure that all these little lines, and you go in with a small brush. And then down the middle again, there's one right there. Because these teeny-weeny little seams can really ruin the effect. And it usually happens here along the corners. And that's where we cut and paste something. Yeah, you see, we weren't as careful as we could have been. So, well, it's pretty good. You could spend a lot of time doing this stuff too. Right. So that's our color map. I think it's, yeah, there's no holes in here. I just want to make sure. Now we're going to save as PNG, and we're going to call this color. And come back to our substance, back to our Explorer, and again, link, bitmap, and we'll pull in color. So we can then get our color map and apply it here. So it's starting, it's starting to look like something. I think I don't know, let's see what happens after we put our roughness in there. It's looking all right. And now the roughness map, I'm going to do straight off of, well, let's see which one. Let's do it off of this normal map. Now, the normal map, the white areas are highest, the black areas are lowest when it's making the normals. That's the exact opposite of what I want sort of my roughness information to be. So before I do anything else, I'm going to invert this grayscale. And now I'm going to bring in another levels node. And I can adjust this now by looking at what's going on in the 3D view. This is a very shiny rock right now. And now it's a question of just adjusting. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on both things in here. I'm keeping an eye on I want to actually see the light reflecting. And then I'm also going to be looking at my grayscale image. And all of this wants to go a whole lot lighter. Because we don't really want, but we're getting these really dark areas, so I'm in a new plan. I'm adjusting for relative values, in other words, how they are in relationship to themselves. And I'm going to adjust, I don't want any one area to have too much of one thing. So that's probably pretty good. And then I'm going to take the whole thing and move this one up so that everything, because my roughest areas aren't going to get any whiter. And so really what I'm doing here is I'm adjusting for, what do I want my my most shiny area to be. And it's going to kind of adjust the whole, but once I've set the values in relation to each other, then I can do that. Let's take a closer look. Yeah. So this is beginning to look like a rock. And very often when I do these, I'll do the same. I mean, we did this with a photograph, but I very often do it with hand-painted textures too, where I'll actually spend a great deal of time I'll spend a lot more time doing these maps, where I'm actually putting in strokes and things like that. And I do it a lot with the filters. So for example, if you wanted to give this kind of a hand-painted look, it's pretty easy to do. Let's just make a copy. And you don't necessarily have to do it to the normal maps or the height maps. Again, it really depends. If I want to have this rock just kind of have more of a painterly look, I can just go into my filter gallery and just start, and that's why I make a copy, because this way if you mess it up, you can always make a new one. I'm a big fan of paint daubs. And it's a really quick and easy way of just having it just look like a really cool hand-painted texture. And we'll go ahead and call this color 2. If you wanted to, you could do this first and then also generate your normals and other maps off of this. It really depends on the kind of look that you want. But let's see what happens. Just we're not going to move this at all. We're just going to come in here and we're going to link color 2 and then replace it in here and just take a look and see how it makes it. Yeah, so see, I like this one better. It's just like more my style, because it just kind of gives it a funkier attitude. But you can do whatever you want. So there's a lot of ways that you can combine all the stuff that you're doing in Photoshop with what you're doing in Substance. And now, once you've got these bitmaps in here, and they're all at your, again, the only rule, if there is such a thing in Substance Designer and making art, because art really isn't really good at rules, is that to prevent disappointment, let's put it that way, always have your bitmaps at the highest resolution that you're planning on having your material adjust up to. And then you don't, like once you're feeding them in here, you don't worry about the parent size. If it's not taking it off of this, it's no sweat. But as the parent size goes up, the nodes that are native to Substance, they may not be calculating the higher resolution in here, but the information is still stored within Substance. If you're bringing in a bitmap, you have to store that information in the bitmap itself. And that's probably the simplest way of thinking about it. So bitmaps always should have the highest res that your material will possibly have. And this way it's stored in there, and if you don't use it, great, you don't use it, but it's there if you need it. So I think I'm going to end this video here. I hope this has been useful. These techniques you can use for a whole bunch of different stuff. And I think I'm going to move on from this in another series after this. We're going to see how, now that we've got this basic texture, I'm going to put my thinking cap on, and we're going to do something procedural starting with this one. Yeah, I really do like this painterly one better. I'm going to keep this one. That's the one I like. So I'll see you in the next video.